Supposed Bible contradiction. Matthew's genealogy versus Old Testament genealogies. Matthew 1:17 reads, "So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to Christ, 14 generations." However, if you count the names Matthew lists, there is a problem. From Abraham to David there is 14, in the next set there is 14, but in the third set there is only 13. Plus, Matthew skips over 3 generations in verse 8, another in verse 11, and several unknown between Salmon and Boaz in verse 5. Thus, the real total is over 45 generations from Abraham to Christ, not 42. So did Matthew make a mistake and contradict the genealogies of Kings and Chronicles? Well, this can be resolved by looking at a social concept of the biblical world with regards to numerology. In the modern West, numbers are only used for signifying a quantitative value, but in the biblical world, numbers could be used to signify other meanings, and can be completely disassociated from their quantitative value. The Catholic historian Michael Hunt explains Matthew's use of cutting out generations and counting others twice is done on purpose because he is using numerology to put an important message in his genealogy we often miss in the West. Again, for us, numbers usually only refer to a numerical value, but for the ancient Jews, numbers could be used for a more significant message. In sacred scripture, numbers usually have more significance than their quantitative indicators. More often than not, even when a number is used to indicate a certain quantity, the individual number given may point beyond the numerical value to a symbolic significance. At other times, the number given is not to be taken literally, and may represent an approximate value, a symbolic value, or may represent hyperbole. He lists examples like the creation week. It could just be divided symbolically into 7 days, because 7 is a number of perfection. Man and beast are listed on day 6, because 6 is a number for beast and man. Another that ancient and modern scholars have pointed to is the 144,000 listed in Revelation 7. This is probably symbolic for the perfect redemption of man, not an actual future gathering. The number 666 for the beast in Revelation is symbolic as that is the gematria of Nero Caesar. So Matthew is also using numerology to give a message to his Jewish audience through his genealogy, which is why he is reorganizing the genealogy on purpose. He divides it into 3 sets of 14 by counting David twice, once before the kingdom was established and once after, 3 being another number of perfection and 14 being the number in gematria of King David. Add the 3 together, you get 42, which is the number used for God's sovereign plan unfolding. Also, if you were to count every name in the genealogy, the total would be 86. 8 is the number of salvation, 10 is the number of divine order, and 6 is the number of man. So in that, you have salvation times divine order through one man, who is the perfect heir to King David, which has been unfolded through the line of Abraham. Essentially, using numerology, that is what Matthew is saying, and why the genealogy was manipulated. Numerology was very important to the ancient Jews, and Matthew, wishing to impress his fellow Jewish readers, encoded a large amount into his gospel, especially in the opening. For a Jew of that time hearing this, there would have been no doubt as to who Matthew was claiming Jesus was. Matthew wasn't using numbers for their quantitative value, and that was perfectly acceptable to do in that culture. So this supposed contradiction can be explained by pointing to the cultural context. Matthew was intentionally reorganizing the data to put a much more important message in his genealogy, namely that from Abraham and through the line of David, God's divine plan is unfolded to bring forth the Messiah.